It's interesting, looking back now, how quickly I became politically aware. I read things and everything just fell into place, just like that, and I just changed. It was like something deep inside me had been waiting, something really tiny had been sleeping, timidly, until suddenly the door opened and the light flooded in and it burst into life. So powerful.
After you left university, you applied to be a teacher of the deaf, but you were turned down.
Yes, that was weird. So, okay, when I finished college, I wanted to carry on being a hippie, just to make that clear. I didn't want to get a job. But the problem was, where would I live? So I had to swallow my pride and move back with my father. So my father, he was sly. He set me up, tricked me into a job interview. So I was stuck. I had to go into that, a short-term temporary job. But I felt the pressure to start looking for some kind of job. At the same time, I could feel that the hippie era was coming to an end. So, okay, let's move on to the next step. So I applied everywhere. Newspapers, TV, all sorts of jobs. And I got turned down everywhere. So that was that. So that's when I thought I could be a teacher of the deaf. Did I think I could teach? Could I, heck? But give it a go. And that's how it happened. So I wrote off and got a reply. You're not allowed to teach because you're deaf. So they'd been lying. When I was growing up, they told me I was all right. I wasn't deaf. And now this letter. I still have the letter. It was at that moment that I realised they'd been lying to me all along. There'd been dirty things going on behind the scenes for a long time, which I didn't know about. So then I thought I could try to become a social worker. At that time, most social workers were hearing, maybe only 4 or 5. At that time, how many deaf professionals were there? Maybe 4 or 5?
Very few.
So I went for social worker, tried to get a job. But I couldn't sign. How daft was that? So I was turned down. Then I remember I went to, it was called the North London Poly. They offered training as a social worker for the deaf. The boss there at the time was Arthur Verney. Yes, the very one. So I asked if I could join the course, but he said no. First, I'd have to go and get some experience. So there were barriers at every turn. I was stuck. It was like catch-22. But I was lucky. West London advertised a job as a social worker for the deaf. So I finally got the job and started working with deaf children, deaf youth and so on. So I was aiming to, well, what happened was most social workers at that time were missioners. They were based in the deaf clubs, not like under the local authority, keeping a professional distance, not interfering with deaf people's lives in the community, but more dealing with individuals. So we had a list of 200 children in the borough, the London borough of Hillingdon, in West London, near the airport. This daft peripatetic teacher gave us this list and didn't realise we had our own plans of what to do with it. So we split the list between us, 100 each, north and south. And our aim was to collect the children, to persuade them to come and join our youth club, go on youth holidays, join the football team and everything. But first, we had to go into their homes and persuade their parents to let them join. And the parents were very oral, so that was tough. So I'd have to go in, be on my best behaviour. Hello, I'm a nice deaf person. Then, when the mother went to make the tea, I'd start signing away to the child. Then, as soon as she came back, I'd stop. So really, I was lucky to be able to go in there and see the experience of deaf children's suffering. I think most deaf people don't see that because it happens in private, behind closed doors, and it was always very touching because the family suffers just as much. They'd been told the oralist lie and they couldn't communicate with their children. The deaf child would be completely left out, like a lamppost standing in the room, totally isolated. So we had to try and draw them in, get them involved. But then the local education authority realised what we were doing and they put a stop to it. They wouldn't give us any more children. Plus they disciplined me as well. The Deputy Director of Education summoned me and wanted to know why I was trying to move these children to residential schools. I'd seen their terrible home situations and suggested they should think about residential schools. So I got slapped on the wrist and told I shouldn't be doing this, but luckily my boss supported me. So that opened my eyes. They had lied to me and they were lying to them as well. And if it was happening in one area, the same thing must be happening all over Britain. So it was terrible. We had to do something. The other part of it was, I'd arrived not able to sign at all. So I was told I had to learn to sign. But at that time, there were no courses. It was before all that started. So anyway, there was only one course, and that was one for missioners. So I joined the missioners course, and that gave me another insight deaf people rarely got into what was happening behind the scenes. The way they talked about deaf people was horrifying. I realised, so that's how you talk about us. Because a missioner would come and give a talk and say things like, oh, the deaf and dumb, they're not very bright, all that sort of thing. They'd feed that kind of garbage to the audience, and the new missioners would sit there taking it all in. Deaf and dumb, they're a bit stupid. So I was lucky that I was given those two insights. And I knew we had to do something about this. We had to change things. I had to accept responsibility to sort this out.
I'd like to pick up on something you said. You said you went into those houses and you saw children suffering. Did you feel that had a special resonance for you because of your own experiences?
Yes, I did see them suffer, but I'm more lucky. I have a degree. I went through hell to get it, but I have a degree. I got through the system, and I have that hippie ethos. I've got the rebel inside me. But for them, it was just terrible. Some of these children were locked up in their bedrooms, not allowed out. One lad's house I visited, I rang the doorbell and I knew the boy's bedroom was just above the front door, the first window. So I rang the bell and looked up. There he was waving to me. I waved back and rang the bell again. His mother came and I asked if he could come down, but she wouldn't allow it. He stayed up there. I don't know if he's still there now. He was a prisoner. I think when you look back, there was more child abuse and so on, but we have more power now. At that time, you might have a gut feeling that a child was being abused, but you couldn't call it out and you couldn't put a name to it. There was no official procedure to remove children from their abusers.
It was through your work as a social worker for deaf people that you met deaf adults for the first time. Is that right? What did that feel like?
It was the first time I'd met deaf adults or children at all. So, youth. We talked about deaf young people, how they teased me, gave me the Jesus sign name because I looked like a hippie, all that. I got on quite well with them, especially those who'd been to PHUs, partially hearing units, because they were really lost. The ones who went to a deaf school were not too bad, but the ones who'd been to PHUs were lost. So they formed an attachment with me and kept coming up to me. My heart went out to them. I liked them. Deaf adults. Okay, so I could see how bad things were in my area. I would have to do something to change that. So I started looking for other deaf people who wanted to change things as well. And it was hard because at that time, deaf people were very submissive, under the missioner's iron thumb. But I eventually managed to find some, and we got together to set something up. And we agreed to set up the NUD, the National Union of the Deaf. And that was where I really got immersed in mixing with deaf adults. They were mostly older deaf people who fingerspelled everything, people like Arthur Dimmock, Stan Woodhouse, people like that. Most of them were from Newcastle, from the north, and they never used lip movement when they were fingerspelling. And that was a wonderful eye-opener for me. I loved it because I couldn't rely on lip reading. I had to take it in as it was. Plus, they were passing down history to us at the same time, so I was ecstatic and very lucky.
So in 1976, you and some of these other people set up a new group, the NUD, the National Union of the Deaf. What did you hope to see? What were you trying to achieve?
It's very interesting. I love looking back to the NUD. I'm very proud of what we did. I think people today don't know very much about it and what we achieved, what we were aiming for. It was incredible. And these things are still important today. So first, education was the main thing. We were fighting for deaf children because at that time we were very frustrated with the BDA. They seemed to be doing nothing, getting nowhere. Looking back now, they weren't that bad. But the others, like the RNID, weren't helpful, of course. The National Deaf Children's Society was oralist itself. So we were very determined about our aims in education, but we wanted to use what we called hearing ways of campaigning out on the streets with placards. We did that outside meetings of oralists with placards and handing out leaflets. Before, deaf people would never have done anything like that, but we persevered and kept on handing them out. So our main focus was campaigning on education. But I think our biggest achievement was in television. We wanted to make our own TV programme. At that time, the BBC had something called Open Door, where anybody could send in an application to make their own programme. So that was broadcast, and then we linked up with the BDA to set up the Deaf Broadcasting Campaign, the DBC, which aimed to make sure we had a programme every week. And what happened, this is interesting, the director of the BBC, Bill Cotton, happened to see our programme. And he said two things. One, to make sure our programme was put in the vaults for posterity, to keep it there as an historic programme. And second, he said the BBC should have a deaf programme. So we had discussions and 2 years later, See Here started.
The NUD had been challenging the BDA to do more, but in 1981, when the BDA was still full of hearing people, they brought you in as an administrator in a senior administrative position. Did you feel now you were in, the BDA had started to become more of a campaigning organisation? Was that a kind of dream job for you?
So they advertised the job. They wanted 2 administrative people to be brought in. They wanted them both to be deaf. One of the people they brought in was Lillian Lawson, and they asked me to be the other. I was very reluctant because I felt the job should go to a deaf person. I didn't want to be another hard-of-hearing person taking the limelight instead of supporting behind the scenes. But I went in, did the interview, and they offered me the job. And I really felt I was home. I had come home. Finally, I was home. This was it. I was in the deaf community at last. I could develop the community's political direction and work towards the goals we wanted to achieve. It was a nice team as well. Dot Miles was there at the same time. Dot was unique. She had a vision of the deaf world, of what the future could be. Creative, artistic, full of poetry. And this was linked with spirituality for her. So we had a real bond. We asked ourselves, what are deaf people here for? Why were we born deaf? Are we a mistake, a genetic mistake? Is that all? Or is there more to it than that? And that connected with my hippie side, so we had that bond. Why are we living here? Why are we born? Out of all the millions of planets in the universe, why do deaf people live here? What are these strange beings walking around with 2 eyes and 2 legs? And all that warfare and killing going on? Why don't we just step back and say, hang on, how did we get here? Do you know what I mean? People follow religions, and there's still that question. Why are we here? That's a hippie way of thinking, and there's a direct relevance to the deaf world as well. Why are we here? So Dot and I would discuss these things. Why are we here? Is there something up there with a purpose in all this that wants deaf people to be here, you know?
When you were at the NUD, you presented the TV programme Signs of Life. See Here started sometime afterwards in 1981. And they headhunted you as a presenter for that programme as well. Did you feel that was another dream job?
That ruined my life, that one. Because, OK, what happened was, See Here started broadcasting. One series went out, and really it was revolting. It was terrible. There were no deaf people involved. It was mostly hearing programmes with an interpreter on the side. Oh, it was vile. So I was very happy in my BDA job at the London office, and then one day Arthur Verney came in and he said to me, "Hey, I've got your dream job for you." I said, "I've already got it, thanks, here." Anyway, I said, "No, you don't understand. I'm being serious. I'm good here." He said, "But See Here needed a new presenter. Somebody else had pulled out." I said, "So? Nothing to do with me. See Here's rubbish anyway. I don't want to work there." He said, "But that's why you need to get in there. Improve it. Fight to change it." I said, "No thanks, I don't want it. I'm happy here, I'm ecstatic. This is the perfect job for me." He said, "But you understand TV. You know how to make programmes." So we argued. But I'm rubbish if somebody puts that kind of pressure on in an argument. I always lose. If they're arguing for the benefit of the deaf community, not what suits me, you know, that's the way I grew up. So I said to him straight out, "OK, this is like World War I. You're telling me to go over the top, to march towards the gunfire, get slaughtered. You're asking me to go over the top. Let's just be clear about that. That's what you're asking me to do." OK. So I joined See Here. We wanted deaf presenters. We wanted BSL presenters. So we had arguments every day, every minute of every day, telling them, "No, that's wrong. Forget that. This is what we should be doing." Arguing on and on. It was incredible. Very stressful. We looked all over Britain for a deaf presenter. So that series, we brought in about 10 deaf presenters, I think. Wendy Daunt, Jerry Hughes, Gloria Pullen, various others, Mika Broher. Trying them out to see if we could find a permanent presenter. Then I'd be off the hook. Hooray! Then we made the film in Scotland at Moray House, that famous story. I saw Clive Mason on film, just a short clip, and I was riveted. And I knew that was our man. So we realised we'd been giving each presenter 2 programmes each. But the following year, we wanted Clive. So we tried to persuade him to go full-time. He had that charisma. So we managed to persuade him and finally brought him in. And ruined his life forever. But that was my achievement, if I look back. My achievement to bring in a BSL presenter for See Here.
So working through all those challenges at See Here, was that an exciting time for you?
It made me ill. That was where my illness really started, that period. My father died in the summer of 1984. That was a shock to me, but that's another story. And then, that same summer, 84, I realised that I'd been struggling for 2 years with all the arguments at See Here. I was becoming exhausted. I realised that if I aimed to climb up the ladder to become the series producer of See Here, once I reached there, I would have no other direction to go in. I would have to stay there. I'd be stuck. And something inside me was screaming, "No, no." So, okay, I went back home and started to work for the next year's series. I went into the office one day, came home and collapsed. I was done. I didn't know where I was. It was awful. It was a bit like glandular fever, something like that. I just collapsed.
When your father died, that must have been a real shock for you.
I'm not sure I can really talk about my father openly, because he doesn't deserve for me to come out publicly with the story of our relationship at that time. He doesn't deserve that. He tried his best. But his death was very sudden, and it did leave me struggling. I think it's interesting in life. I feel when your first parent dies, that's one thing. When your second parent dies, the impact is completely different, because then you realise there's nobody behind you now. They're gone, and you're left. It's hard to explain. You have to be in that situation, don't you? You're lost, and you think, could it be me next? There's something about that feeling that's very powerful. I'm sure that didn't help me with See Here, I'm sure. But it's difficult for me to talk about my father's situation at that time. Just let it be. I don't want to seem critical. I think in private I'd be happy to talk about it, but in public, it's not fair to his memory. No.
You then got a job with LDVP, the London Deaf Video Project, which later became LDAP, the London Deaf Access Project, under the BDA. Did you feel that after the glamour of working at the BBC in television, that was very different? How do you feel that went?
LDAP. At that time, London had 50 deaf clubs. 50! Our aim was to produce translations of information, right? But it was the community who told us what they wanted us to translate. What was important for them? We had to adapt according to what they wanted. We had a representative from each club come to our meetings. We'd hand out these piles of videos. They'd take them back to their deaf clubs, advertise them, show them, bring them back to us and discuss them. It was a really democratic grassroots structure, the kind I dreamed of. It gave them a feeling of power, confidence and being part of something bigger. We brought London together with all these things. It was a beautiful aim. It still is a beautiful aim. But the problem now is we don't have 50 deaf clubs anymore. There's only a fraction of that. But it was a beautiful time, really a time I treasure. So many deaf people were brought in, learned, moved up and moved on to other things. It was beautiful.
In 1992, you hadn't worked much in universities until that time. But then Gallaudet University invited you to take up the post of Power EV Doctor, Chair of Deaf Studies, going over to America to work. How did that happen?
My aim has always been about what the deaf community needs at any given moment for its development, you know? So, television, education, we'd seen some improvements there. So what gap was there that nobody was looking at? Understand? So at that time I was looking around and realised that, OK, sign language was starting to be recognised and accepted. But when it came to deaf culture, that was important and nobody was looking at that area. I think culture's a very hard subject. If you grow up and that culture's just part of your normal everyday life, the British way, then you don't know anything different. So what is British deaf culture? Where do you look to analyse that experience? How do you break through that dilemma? Go to another country and compare deaf cultures. So that was why I went to America, to compare American deaf culture and British deaf culture, see what the differences were between the two, and that would help me define the characteristics of British deaf culture. So that was why I went.
While you were at Gallaudet University, your close friend, ally and mentor Dot Miles, Dorothy Miles, died. You'd been working together, planning projects together. Did her death give added impetus to your motivation to see those plans through?
I said before I didn't want to talk about my father. And then Dot. But death must. That's why I'm here in this chair, because death must. So, Dot. It's still difficult because you want short answers and I can't. Dot. I knew her from the time she came back from America, and we had a really close relationship. She taught me a lot. She showed me how a deaf person can aim to reach a higher level. Plus her spiritual qualities, her art, her creativity. These things were rare in Britain at the time. So I thought, when I came back, I was looking forward to working with her on the area of deaf culture. But then she was gone. One, I felt guilty because I had left. And then this. I felt bad about that. Plus other things I can't talk about happened. But the third thing was, how could I do my research without her? I had always expected us to do all that together. So, I think lost. I think I felt lost for a few years. Luckily, I had other deaf people who stepped in. Their wisdom, their cultural wisdom, they shared that. So they gave me support. People like Gloria Pullen, people like that. They were incredible. And it was really through them that I was able to finally look at the situation and find the strength to carry on.